I stared at the pile of bills on our kitchen table, the edges curling slightly from humidity. Rent, utilities, credit cards, each envelope was a testament to our dwindling finances. I knew I should be focused on the textbook in front of me, but the numbers seemed to blur together. Medical school was demanding, both in terms of time and money, and it felt like I was constantly running uphill. Lizzie walked in, her face flushed from the summer heat and her apron still on from her shift at the diner. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes betraying the toll that double shifts were taking on her. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing how hard she worked to support us while I pursued my dream. "Warren, we need to talk," she said, dropping her bag onto a chair with a heavy sigh. Her voice had a tired edge to it, one that I had become all too familiar with. "I know, Lizzie," I replied, glancing up from my textbooks. "I'll pick up more shifts at the store. We'll make it work." "That's not enough," she snapped, frustration evident in her voice. "We're drowning, Warren. Your dream of becoming a doctor is killing us." Her words stung, but I couldn't let go of my dream. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a doctor, to help people, to make a difference. I worked part-time at the local store, but it barely covered our essentials. Medical school was a financial drain, but I couldn't abandon my aspirations. "Not now. I'm doing the best I can," I said quietly, turning a page in my anatomy book, though the words blurred together. "And what about me?" Lizzie's voice wavered. "I'm working double shifts, missing out on life. I love you, Warren, but this isn't the life I signed up for." I looked at her, my heart aching. Lizzie was my anchor, my support through all these years. But now, I could see the strain in her eyes, the exhaustion etched into her face. "I promise, Lizzie, it'll get better. Once I become a doctor, we won't have to worry about money anymore." She shook her head, tears welling up. "But at what cost? We're barely holding on, Warren. Something has to change." "I know it's hard," I said, reaching out to take her hand. "But I'm so close, Lizzie. Just a little longer." Lizzie pulled her hand away, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I can't keep living like this, Warren. I need something to change. We need something to change." The tension between us grew with each passing day, each unpaid bill a reminder of our precarious situation. I threw myself into my studies, trying to ignore the growing distance between us. I knew Lizzie was right, but I couldn't let go of my dream. Not yet. One evening, as I was buried in my books, Lizzie sat across from me, her eyes red from crying. "Warren, we have to talk about this." "Really talk?" "All right," I said, putting my pen down and looking at her. "Let's talk. I love you," she began, her voice trembling. "But I'm so tired. I'm working myself to the bone, and it feels like we're getting nowhere. I need to know that there's an end in sight." "There is," I insisted. "Once I finish med school, things will be different. We'll have more money, more stability." "How much longer, Warren? How much longer do I have to wait?" Lizzie's eyes pleaded with me for an answer. "Another year, maybe 2, I said, feeling the weight of my words. "I know it's a lot to ask, but we're so close, Lizzie." Lizzie shook her head, her expression one of defeat. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if we can keep doing this. I believe in us," I said, trying to infuse my voice with confidence. "We've come this far together. We can make it." "I hope you're right," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Because I don't know how much more I can take." I watched her walk away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The weight of our financial struggles pressed down on me, but I couldn't give up. I had to find a way to balance my dreams with the reality of our situation. For Lizzie's sake. For both of us. The morning started like any other. Lizzie was up before dawn, getting ready for her shift at Bella's Bistro. The sound of her moving around in the kitchen woke me up. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of our unresolved conversation from the night before. I wanted to fix things, to make everything right for us, but I didn't know how. Lizzie's voice broke through my thoughts. "Warren, do you want some coffee before I go?" I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. She was already in her uniform, her hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. Despite the strain between us, she looked beautiful. "Sure, that would be great," I replied, forcing a smile. She handed me a cup, and we stood there in awkward silence, the tension palpable. "I've got a long shift today," she said finally. "Rufus, the new owner, wants to make some changes." "Good luck," I said. "I hope it goes well." "Thanks," she replied, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Bella's bistro was bustling when Lizzie arrived. The lunch rush was just beginning, and the restaurant was filled with the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, and the savory aroma of food. Lizzie put on her apron and got to work, her movements quick and efficient. Midway through her shift, Rufus walked in. He was a tall, imposing man with a stern face and a no-nonsense attitude. He had taken over the restaurant a few weeks ago and had already started making changes, some of which the staff weren't too happy about. Lizzie was carrying a tray of steaming bowls of soup when Rufus approached her. "Lizzie, can you come to my office after you're done with this table?" he asked, his tone curt. "Sure thing, Rufus," Lizzie replied, trying to keep her voice steady. As she turned to serve the soup, her foot caught on the edge of a rug. The tray tilted, and before she could catch it, a bowl of hot soup spilled all over Rufus. He jumped back with a shout, the soup staining his crisp white shirt and scalding his skin. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Lizzie exclaimed, her face pale. "I didn't mean to." Rufus held up a hand to stop her. His face was a mix of anger and pain. "My office. Now." Lizzie followed him, her heart pounding. She had been working at Bella's Bistro for years, and the thought of losing her job terrified her. She needed this job, especially with the financial strain she and Warren were under. In Rufus's office, he shut the door behind them and turned to face her, his expression stern. "What happened out there, Lizzie?" he demanded. "It was an accident, Rufus," Lizzie said, her voice shaking. "I tripped. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning and—" "That's not the point," Rufus interrupted. "This isn't the first time you've had an accident, is it?" "No, but nothing," Rufus snapped. "I can't have my staff making mistakes like this. It reflects poorly on the restaurant." Lizzie felt tears pricking her eyes. "Please, Rufus, I need this job. I'll be more careful, I promise." Rufus looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "I should fire you, Lizzie. But I've seen how hard you work. I'm going to give you another chance. Don't make me regret it." Relief washed over Lizzie, and she nodded quickly. "Thank you, Rufus. I won't let you down." "You'd better not," Rufus said, his tone softer now. "Now, go get cleaned up and finish your shift." Lizzie hurried out of the office, feeling a mix of fear and relief. She couldn't afford to lose this job. Not now. Not with everything else going on. She took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and got back to work. Over the next few days, Lizzie noticed Rufus watching her more closely. At first, she was nervous, but as the days went by, she realized his gaze wasn't just critical. He seemed to be observing her, almost as if he were trying to understand her better. One evening, as she was finishing her shift, Rufus approached her again. "Lizzie," he said, his voice unusually gentle. "I wanted to apologize for the other day. I was too harsh." Lizzie looked up at him, surprised. "It's okay, Rufus. I understand." "No, it's not okay," he insisted. "You're a hard worker, and I respect that. I just wanted you to know that I see it." "Thank you," Lizzie said, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. "That means a lot." From that day on, Rufus and Lizzie began to talk more. He would ask her about her day, listen to her concerns, and offer advice. Lizzie found herself looking forward to their conversations, the stress of her job feeling a little lighter with each passing day. She knew it was dangerous territory, but Rufus's kindness was a balm to her weary soul. Little did she know, this growing connection would lead her down a path she never expected, and one that would change her life, and Warren's, forever. It was a Friday evening, and the air was thick with the heat of summer. I was finishing up my shift at the grocery store, feeling the usual fatigue settle into my bones. The store was quiet, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I grabbed my things and headed out, thinking about Lizzie. Things had been tense between us, but I still loved her. I just wanted to make everything right. When I got home, the apartment was dark. I called out for Lizzie, but there was no answer. I assumed she was still at work, probably staying late again. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down on the couch, trying to unwind. The quiet felt oppressive, a stark contrast to the chaos of the grocery store. Hours passed, and Lizzie still hadn't come home. I started to worry, but tried to push the thoughts away. She'd been working long hours lately, and maybe she just needed some time alone. I decided to go to bed, hoping she'd be home by morning. The next day, I woke up to the sound of Lizzie in the kitchen. I got up and found her making breakfast, her back to me. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned around, a strained smile on her face. "Hey. I thought I'd make us some breakfast." "Sounds good," I replied, trying to read her expression. "You okay?" "Yeah, just tired," she said, turning back to the stove. I wanted to press her, to ask where she had been last night, but I held back. Instead, I just sat at the table, watching her. There was something different about her, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. A few days later, I was working a late shift when I overheard a conversation that would shatter my world. I was stocking shelves when I heard two of my coworkers talking in the next aisle. "Did you hear about Lizzie and Rufus?" one of them said. "Yeah, I saw them together last night." "They looked pretty cozy," the other replied. My heart sank. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I knew I shouldn't jump to conclusions, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, when I got home, I confronted Lizzie. She was sitting on the couch, reading a book, when I walked in. "Lizzie, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. She looked up, her eyes wide with concern. "What's wrong?" "I overheard something at work today." "About you and Rufus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Lizzie's face paled, and she set the book down. "Warren, Is it true?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Are you having an affair with him?" There was a long silence, and then she nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Warren. I didn't mean for it to happen." My world shattered in that moment. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "How long?" I managed to choke out. "A few months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Why, Lizzie? Why?" She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know. I was just so lonely, and Rufus was there for me." "I'm so sorry, Warren." I felt a rage building inside me, but also a deep sadness. "I can't do this anymore, Lizzie. I can't stay with you." She looked up, her eyes filled with desperation. "Please, Warren, don't leave me. We can work through this." "No," I said firmly, my voice breaking. "I'm done." I packed a bag and left that night. I couldn't stay in the apartment where we had shared so many memories, where I had loved her so deeply. I stayed with my friend Millie for a while, trying to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. The divorce was quick and painful. We both knew it was the right thing to do, but that didn't make it any easier. I tried to focus on my future, on my dreams, but it was hard to see a way forward. One evening, as I was sitting with Millie, she looked at me with a determined expression. "Warren, you need a fresh start. Have you ever thought about acting?" I laughed bitterly. "Acting? Millie, I was trying to be a doctor. Acting seems so unrealistic." "Why not? You're smart, you're hardworking, and you need something new in your life," she insisted. Her words stuck with me, and eventually, I decided to give it a shot. I started taking acting classes, and to my surprise, I found a new passion. It was different from anything I had ever done, but it felt right. Lizzie and I finalized our divorce, and I tried to move on. But the pain lingered, a constant reminder of what had been and what was lost. As I delved deeper into acting, I started to find a new purpose, a new dream. And though it was different from what I had originally planned, it gave me hope for the future. The months turned into years, and slowly, the pain began to fade. I focused on my career, on building a new life. And while I still thought of Lizzie from time to time, I knew that I had to keep moving forward. The months passed in a blur. I threw myself into acting, trying to distract myself from the pain of the divorce. Millie was a constant source of support, encouraging me every step of the way. She believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. One night, after an acting class, Millie and I were sitting in a small cafe near the theater. The place was quiet, with only a few other patrons scattered around. We sipped our coffee, the aroma filling the air. "You know, Warren," Millie said, breaking the silence, "you're really good at this. I mean, really good." I shrugged, staring into my cup. "Thanks, Millie. But it's hard to see a future in it. I feel like I'm just grasping at straws." She reached across the table, placing her hand on mine. "You've got talent, Warren. You just need to believe in yourself. And who knows? Maybe this is your calling." I nodded, trying to take her words to heart. But the doubt still lingered, a shadow that refused to leave. A few weeks later, I got my first break. It was a small role in an independent film, but it was something. I threw myself into the part, determined to prove to myself that I could do this. The experience was exhilarating, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. As the months turned into a year, I started getting more roles. Small parts at first, but gradually they grew bigger. I worked hard, honing my craft, and it paid off. I landed a recurring role on a popular TV series about doctors. It was ironic, considering my original dream, but I embraced it. One evening, after a particularly long day on set, I got a call from Millie. "Hey, Warren. Did you hear the news?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. I frowned, leaning back on my couch. "What news?" "They're casting for a new movie, and I think you should audition. It's a big deal, Warren. It could be your big break." I hesitated, the old doubts creeping back. "I don't know, Millie. Do you really think I'm ready for something like that?" "I know you are," she said firmly. "You've come so far, Warren. This is your chance." Her words filled me with a newfound determination. I decided to go for it. The audition process was nerve-wracking, but I gave it my all. And to my surprise, I got the part. The movie was a success, and my career began to take off. I was finally starting to make a name for myself, and it felt incredible. But despite the success, there was still a part of me that couldn't let go of the past. Lizzie's betrayal had left a scar that refused to heal. One night, as I was walking home from the set, I passed by a familiar restaurant. I stopped, my heart pounding as memories flooded back. This was the place where Lizzie worked now. I hadn't seen her in over a year, but the sight of the restaurant brought back a wave of emotions. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to go in. Part of me wanted to see her, to confront the past and maybe find some closure. But another part of me was terrified of reopening old wounds. In the end, I decided to keep walking. I wasn't ready to face her, not yet. 3 years passed since the divorce, and my life had changed in ways I never could have imagined. I was successful, living my dream, but there was still an emptiness that success couldn't fill. I often wondered if Lizzie ever thought about me, if she regretted what had happened. One afternoon, I was doing a radio interview to promote my latest project. The host was friendly, and we chatted about my career and the journey that had brought me here. But then he asked a question that caught me off guard. "So, Warren, you've come a long way since your days as a medical student. Do you ever miss it?" I paused, considering my answer. "I do, sometimes. But life has a funny way of taking you in unexpected directions. I'm grateful for where I am now, even if it's not what I originally planned." After the interview, as I was walking to my car, I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw Lizzie standing there, looking nervous. "Warren, Hi, she said softly, her eyes searching mine. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, longing. Lizzie. What are you doing here? I heard your interview on the radio, she admitted, wringing her hands. I wanted to see you. We stood there in awkward silence, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. Finally, she spoke again. I'm sorry, Warren. For everything. I know I hurt you, and I regret it every day. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. I appreciate that, Lizzie. But we've both moved on. It's in the past now. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I know. I just needed to tell you that. We stood there for a moment longer, and then she turned and walked away. As I watched her go, I felt a strange sense of closure. The pain was still there, but it was less sharp, less overwhelming. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally start to heal. If you like this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.